everyone. Welcome to this episode of Good Chats. Today we're going to be talking about resetting the body, which is a very timely conversation topic for the new year. And everyone's trying to get back in the swing of maybe a bit of overindulgence, myself included, over Christmas. So welcome to our guests. We have with us Fiona O'Donnell and Cameron Molloy. Thank you both for joining us.
Cheers, James.
Thank you.
So Fiona, we'll start with you. So you have a master's degree in mindfulness-based approaches from Bangor University, and you're also a lecturer at University College Dublin in mindfulness-based interventions. So it sounds like your education and your pathway has been quite geared towards what you do now. At what stage did you know you wanted to get into this line of work?
I suppose I worked in children's services for a number of years and then was in philanthropy, and I suppose I was in a really good organisation. It was Chuck Feeney's Atlantic Philanthropies, and they have a spend down model, so spending the money aggressively, and as part of that they were allowing us to really move into our next career, whatever our passion was. And I had a real interest in mindfulness, brain training, emotional resilience, and I had this opportunity then to spend 3 years in Bangor University studying the different models of these approaches.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And right now you're doing some courses within Oracle as well, I understand it?
Yeah, so more of a work-based training program. It's called B Training, Brain Exercise. So really we're doing a brain training with emotional resilience geared towards the workplace. And
Fantastic.
That's happening at the moment. We have a great group, and we're in our kind of second week of this training. So we're going to test the results. Everyone's doing a survey, checking their concentration and awareness, and we'll test it again at the end. But the results have been really good. We've had about a 10% increase in concentration, overall well-being, emotional resilience. So it seems to be going pretty well.
Great. Do we have any of your course participants here as well
Yes,
today?
There's a few.
Brilliant. Hello,
so
everyone.
Great to see you. Thanks for turning up.
So you're getting in some free material today, so thanks for coming along. Thank you, Fiona. We also have with us Cameron Molloy. Hello, Cameron.
Hey, how are things?
Good, thank you. So I understand you're a former competitive football player and swimmer.
Yep.
You're currently a coach and account manager for Fitvision.
Yeah.
And you do some Kickstart programs across quite a few different industries. So similar question to you. Can you tell us a bit more about your current role and what drew you to it?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thanks for having me, guys. Excuse me. What sort of drew me to this was I was pretty linear in where I was going with football, and I began to get my coaching badges. I began to sort of expand instead of just focusing on myself. This was over a couple of years then I started to build up as a coach before I stumbled upon this. I stumbled upon workplace wellness. I stumbled upon the team that I had. When I started to dip my toe into it, I realised for the first time ever I had a bit more of a passion for something that wasn't just sport. So I let it grow organically. It took about 12 months, and then part-time grew into full-time, and before I knew it I was in something that I loved, and I sort of left sport to the side and said, you know what, this is something I could really chase. Taking care of myself, taking care of others. But I feel like workplace wellness, in general, even education isn't something that, from travelling, isn't something that is prioritised in Ireland or wasn't prioritised in Ireland. It's a massive market, but there's just so much to be thought, and there's so much work to be done that I felt, you know what, this is something worth pursuing. So that was about 2-3 years ago. Mm-hmm. That's 2-3 years worth of work now on top of a bit more qualification in the industry and making sure that I'm actually ready to serve people as much as I can. So that's sort of what got me to where I am now.
Brilliant. And since you started, you said around 2 or 3 years ago there, have you noticed much of a shift in the attitude from corporates about this kind of coaching and physical stuff at work?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of, most things in general is, if you see your tier one companies and the big companies in the country, you see that they may put on some stuff that a small to medium business can't really afford, i.e. workplace wellness. What it was thought of was really the fluffy stuff. It was like, oh, get your work done and then we'll take care of you, you know? Whereas think back to mid-80s where the fluffy stuff was health and safety. The fluffy stuff was maybe PPE. The fluffy stuff was work-life balance. Now it grew to the point where it's got to happen. It's got to happen if you're going to take care of your employees. This is something that isn't negotiable. Mm-hmm. We're starting to see that with workplace wellness. We're starting to see that with actually taking care of your employees. So you know yourself financially, it makes a lot of sense to take care of your employees because you retain talent, you improve your productivity, you decrease absenteeism and presenteeism. But it's not even that. It's actually just taking care of them. It's not getting an economic benefit. It's just taking care of them. And you see that now is a lot more than just your tier one clients, your innovative big tech companies. It's everywhere now that it is becoming mandatory. Slowly but surely, but it is. You see it now. It's everywhere. It's a small to medium businesses. There's government incentives coming in. It's really like the health and safety of 20, 30 years ago. It's starting to become mandatory, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to work on some evidence so I can have afternoons off with my boss maybe. So if you can have a chat with him.
I'll look after you.
That'd be great. Cheers.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, guys. So Fiona, we'll start with you. A few questions and we'll open up to the audience at the end as well. The new year is all about setting new starts and goals for the year ahead. What goal-setting tips do you have for the new year?
Okay, well, yeah, Happy New Year to everybody. And I suppose keeping it realistic is really helpful. Sometimes we set these goals and we're really setting up a sense of lack within us. I want to have a new body, I want to have a new brain, I want lots of different things. But in fact, can we kind of set this positive intention, this wholesome desire? Actually, I'd like to, set my sights a little bit more in this direction or that direction. And how we can do this, maybe just write down, what am I hoping for this year? Set some intention, some journaling. Another great way to kind of bring some wholesome desires, I suppose, to the year is, maybe sign up for something like an MBS or training. We can support our attention and our awareness. Research shows that a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. So sometimes we can just be feeling a little blue in January and, we're kind of constantly looking at all the things we want to change. So keeping it realistic. What is something that could be a wholesome desire for me going forward for January? So I suppose I'd recommend these mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy programs. They're 8-week trainings, and we really move into kind of a brain training, emotional resilience, seeing if we can kind of develop a little bit more compassion towards ourselves and our lives. Simple things like getting into nature, certainly, getting some exercise, walking at lunchtime. I'm really encouraging people on the program to do that. Get out for 5 minutes, actually eat your lunch. Simple things like that and not be on the phone. Moving away from the phones maybe at nighttime before we're going to bed. So little achievable goals like that can be very, very supportive for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there was 8 weeks trainings for this kind of thing. Do you think that the time you spend and allowing yourself enough time to really get involved with this stuff is the key to this, and not trying to condense everything in 1 week? Is it good to spread it out over a long time?
Definitely, because I suppose, first of all, we need to have the intention of maybe what is it that we would like for the year ahead. But as I said, we can get so fixated on that wanting, that desire, moving into, that end point, that we kind of lose sight of how do we get there. So it can be really supportive to have a group, to get into a routine of training each day, like you do when you're training in the gym for the 6K or the marathon or whatever it is. We move into kind of a daily training, supporting our attention and our awareness when we're doing mindfulness or when we're doing brain training. So it's a commitment of about like 8 to 10 minutes at least a day of this kind of brain training. And through that, then our attention starts to settle, it starts to improve. So like with the gym, you might do a couple of reps, you're not going to notice anything, you mightn't even feel anything at the time. But if you keep doing that training over time, you're going to get a little bit more stability and a little bit more strength of attention. And even with that alone, that's going to support our overall well-being and happiness.
Thanks, Fiona. And Cameron, over to you. So most of us, and we mentioned this at the start, tend to overindulge a little over Christmas, or a lot in some cases, including myself. What advice would you give to anyone who's feeling a bit unmotivated, perhaps, to get back into a healthy routine?
Well, to touch on what Fiona said around having it a little more long-term instead of trying to expect results straight away, I would definitely agree with that. But I think the huge thing with January is momentum. It's got to be momentum. You're looking for progression rather than perfection, which is huge. Whatever that looks like, I'm not talking about just exercise here. I'm talking about nutrition, mindfulness, any sort of recovery that you're talking about. If you start like you want to have every calorie counted and you want to be at the level of an Olympic lifter, this sort of stuff won't happen if you've had 4 weeks off. I wouldn't even encourage you to try to go back to what you previously did when you had those 3-4 weeks off, when you started to relax in December. I would say aim for 70% of it, aim for 80% of it. If you get the ball rolling, you don't know where that goes long term, and it is very much a long term mindset. So I would just say, once you start, that's everything. Once you turn up to a gym, once you turn your cooker on, once you sit down to meditate, anything that you're looking for, getting started is the number one thing. A lot of people will feel in January a thing that I like to call analysis paralysis. This is something that you've got to have the best runners to run your 5K. Mm-hmm. You've got to have the best gear to lift weights. You've got to have the best cooker and all of the Tupperware before you start to meal prep. Anything like that is that last 2%. I really believe the 98% is just getting started, is actually getting out the door, is actually trying to meal prep. And chances are you'll probably destroy it the first time, and that's absolutely all right. You know what I mean? You've got to give yourself a chance to fail just to get the ball rolling. And that's, I would put that to everywhere in my life, but particularly with taking care of yourself. We're really good at taking care of everybody else. We're really good at being a good friend or a good listener. And when it comes to ourselves and we maybe fail or not do something to the level we quite expected, we tend to be a lot harder on ourselves than we would our friends. We tend to be a lot harder on ourselves than we would our colleagues. Give yourself the chance to fail, give yourself the chance to learn, and think long term with your well-being goals for sure.
Yeah. And when it comes to having had that time off over Christmas or any extended break outside of the gym and exercise, from you're saying that it's that incremental loading on the body and not starting off too soon at the point you're at just before you started, because it takes time for the body to adjust, right, and get back into a rhythm.
Absolutely. Think of if I asked you to just sit up from your chair or stand up from your chair now and go and sprint, you're going to ask me, should I not stretch, should I not warm up? It's the very same thing. Your body might get exhausted, your mind will get exhausted. You'll start to fear these things. If you go hell for leather the 1st of January, come the 2nd or 3rd of January, when that motivation starts to go away and you start to forget the reason you're doing this, then that comes mental exhaustion, physical exhaustion. You'll actually start to resent it. And we've all felt this, whether it's exercise, nutrition, work, doing a job you don't like. You know this feeling of just exhaustion where it actually feels like triple the effort it actually is just to get out of bed because you're resenting it. Warm up, allow yourself to just ease into it. So I would never say January, just like a regular week. Monday is always something that you just get going. And then Tuesday is real productivity. It's the same with your January. Have a look at February for some good goals. But January, just get yourself into it and don't be putting too much pressure on yourself. Absolutely.
Thanks, Cameron.
And just to add to that as well, so there's a lot of restriction around January goal setting, what I need to do. But there's other things like having fun, meeting friends, filling our days with the kind of good stuff as well, So not to forget, it's not all about restricting. Can we add some of that fun stuff, that wholesome stuff in? And, getting out in nature, as I said, going for a hike with some friends can be really, really helpful. Dr. Rick Hansen says that if we go on a walk on a different route with someone we love, that actually we're activating neurons in the hippocampus to actually stick instead of what they often do, they just die. Mm-hmm. So, we have these opportunities to have fun as well in January, and not to forget that part too. Yeah.
And that leads me on to quite an important question, and talking about getting out into nature and the elements, really. So this time of year it's particularly cold and dark outside. Is there any advice you would have for kind of facing the elements for what they are head on and making the most of it this time of year?
Sure. Well, I certainly experienced that today because I cycled here from Harold's Cross, so it was quite wet and wintry and I got quite wet. But yeah, we always have an opportunity, don't we, to be present to whatever's happening. But it's the quality of our mind, it's the quality of our attention in that moment. So, I've said to many Oracle staff here, at lunchtime, whether it's raining or it's sunny, get outside, feel if it is cold, cold and wet and wintry, feel that cold air coming into your lungs as you breathe in deeply. That's giving us a moment to be present and moving out of that usual kind of rumination, automatic pilot. And it's a really good way to anchor, having the support of nature around us. And it's quite nice around here. Equally, sunny day, take some time noticing what we can see, the colours, the shades, noticing maybe what we can hear, the birds, whatever is present. So all of these senses that are available to us, they're getting activated, and we're able to kind of anchor in that. It's very supportive for our brain. Every time we come to the present moment through the senses, whether it's what we can see, what we can smell, sensing in the body, this allows us, to be present. And it's firing up neural pathways in the brain as we do this also.
Yeah, if we stay in that present state.
Yeah. So any opportunity we have to get into nature, it definitely supports us. And research is showing even 15 minutes in nature really supports our body. And I don't know about you, but for me, I know what it is to have the busy mind. But, hiking up a mountain or even just walking by a river or a lake, it's very hard to have a busy mind if you're engaged with nature. So it does have an extra emphasis to support us.
Thank you. And Cameron, moving on to you now. So we've covered quite a few of these topics already, but we mentioned there are quite a lot of people this time of year are busy setting goals and objectives for themselves. It is a busy time for a lot of us. We're getting back into the work swing. What advice would you have for someone that says they don't have time for exercise, full stop, or a healthy routine?
The first thing I would have there, because that's a great question. It's the toughest question of the lot, I would say, because, as a well-being coach, it's great to give people encouragement. It's great to empower them. It's great to uplift them. It's what I get out of bed for. But also, if you're going to do it some justice, you've got to bring the truth. You've got to bring some hard truth. And the hard truth is that I could give you an amazing set of tips and tricks around nutrition and exercise, which I probably will as this podcast goes on and the questions come in at the end. But you've also got to have respect for your health, guys. You've got to. Over 3/4 of people in Ireland are not getting the recommended exercise, and 1 in 2 people are getting cancer. 1 in 2. You've got to, as I said, it is the hard truth of what we're dealing with. It's estimated that by 2030, we're going to be leading Europe in the obesity rates. Like, these are huge, huge stats that are facing us because, of course, we've got this amazing flourishing economy of tech companies, but it means we are sedentary. It means we're sedentary, and you've got to make time for it. That's easier said than done for somebody that works in the industry, and I do get that, but the amount of stuff that we do and the amount of travelling across the country in the UK that I would do myself, and I've got a little toddler, I know what it's like to be time efficient and sometimes time poor. If you don't take care of your health now and you don't find the time to take care of your health, you will later find the time to go to the hospital. You will. And you never know the amount of people you're affecting, because this self-respect and this self-care is so contagious. It's so contagious. Your colleagues, your kids, your siblings, your family, when they see it, they cling towards it. They cling towards it, and you don't know who's watching just by having self-respect. That may look like 10 minutes of mindfulness. It may look like a gym session. It may look like a walk. I'm not saying anything specific here. I'm saying self-care in general. It's absolutely huge. You've just got to find the time for it. And I would like you to write down these excuses. Because again, if it is on your priority list, you will make it happen. That's what we are. We'll just look after our priorities. I'm not saying ignore your kids or ignore your career, but you will make time for it if you just realise how important it is. If you do think long term, you'll see that you will rely on a GP. You will rely on a hospital if you don't take care of yourself now. And I urge you to just start. That's all it is. Just start.
And what would you say to someone perhaps who says it's too late to make a reversal in my life because I've lived this way where I've ignored my body, ignored exercise, nutrition for so long now that it just feels too distant away. I'm never going to be at that stage. What would you say to them?
The first thing is you've got to challenge somebody's mindset. You've got to challenge their mindset, and you've got to ask them where that comes from. They've learned that from somewhere, of course, and you've got to challenge it and ask them, well, worst case scenario, which is what I would always like to do with even older family members or older clients. Worst case scenario, if we have a go at this? What is the absolute worst thing that could happen? Because again, you're talking to them, you're not saying, oh, stepping into the gym is the action. You're not saying prepping your meals is the action, or drinking 2 litres of water. The action is self-respect. The action is taking care of yourself. So what is the absolute worst that can happen if we go in this direction? And you'll probably start to get a little bit from somebody. You know what I mean? I always say that. Your neurological pathways, they always say it's 3 weeks to lose or to gain a habit. It probably looks a little bit more like 100 days, just a little over 3 months, but you do start to get used to it after 3 weeks. And those 3 weeks, if you get a bit of accountability from a coach or from a friend, things start to change. So it doesn't matter how old you are. If you give it 3 weeks, things will change for sure.
Thank you. So Fiona, moving on to you, and there was a mention there of getting into habits. We've been told, it's been proven now that our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. So what advice can you give to someone for staying on task and being more focused?
Okay. Yeah, so our attention spans, from about 20 years ago were 12 seconds, believe it or not, and now we're down to about 8 seconds. And I do this test at the beginning of all the training, and we just take a minute to count how long we can stay with the breath before our mind wanders off. And generally speaking, it's 8 seconds, 12 seconds. Maybe somebody whose concentration is quite good, it might be 15 seconds. So it can be quite a surprise to start noticing how weak our concentration is, because we're so plugged in now. It's like a tsunami of information between our phones, work, so much happening. So we really do need to take the time. And I often say to people, how much time are we spending on social media every day? Do you have 10 minutes from your social media to actually do some of these practices I'm inviting you to do? So, I suppose when we're on social media, our attention is just being taken from place to place, and we're not really present. We don't really have control about where our focus is being placed. And the benefits of being able to bring some awareness and focus to the mind is that if we are hijacked by, say, maybe some old memories, or maybe some worries about, I can't do this training, or, what's going to happen in 10 years, bringing up thoughts from 10 years ago. If we have this training, we can become aware. We call it metacognition, meta-awareness. Noticing how we are from moment to moment, noticing the quality of our mind from moment to moment. And when we have this training, when we have this awareness, we can then place our attention on the breath or the body or the senses. So I often say to people, you can do, we'll say, yoga or mindful movement with awareness or without awareness. They'll probably both look the same, but one is the mind is daydreaming. You're just off kind of ruminating, maybe planning, daydreaming, judging, thinking we're using our time effectively, but actually we're just moving ourselves into some sort of old age and lack of concentration with the brain. So it's actually being present to the movements. They don't have to be very, very strong, but noticing that stretch in the body. We do this as part of the 8-week MBSR training. Noticing the stretch in the body. Even at the B training, we do some rolling of the shoulders, engaging in the body a little, forward bends. All of these things that can support us in our day, but also allow us to be present, and anchor into this moment. So I suppose what I'd really be recommending for people is to think of maybe something achievable, either, getting involved in the B training or an 8-week MBS or MBCT, or maybe having an accountability buddy, a friend that you decide, okay, let's give this a go for, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and just see how it is to engage in a daily 10-minute practice. You don't have to like it, you just have to do it, okay? So that's kind of, you don't even have to feel relaxed. Like I said, it's just this training to engage in noticing the mind's going to wander so much, bringing it back, letting go, beginning again. And sure enough, the mind will start getting a little sharper, like the muscles in the body if we're training also. So this would be a really good kind of first step for, really wanting to support our brain long-term going forward for the year.
Yeah. And being present in those moments of yoga, or whether it's meditation, you're saying that has a direct impact, say, when I'm back at my desk and I'm seeing emails ping in or I have a temptation to go on social media. It's training my brain to respond differently, effectively.
Absolutely, because we've got kind of crudely 3 parts of our brain. So the oldest part, the reptilian part of our brain, that really is only interested in survival, that fight, flight, freeze. The middle part, the mammalian part of our brain, which came next, the limbic system, and then the neocortex. So if that little reptile is getting activated, and it is so many times during the day, then this kind of problem-solving neocortex part of the brain, that goes offline. So I suppose, I don't know if anybody here has done it, I have. It's sending an email to the wrong person that you really shouldn't have sent the email to. And, that activation of heat through the body, the embarrassment, the cheeks get a bit red. And that's the body engaged in that kind of fight, flight, freeze reaction. So we're allowing a lot of cortisol, adrenaline is coming through the body. It's really supportive if we are in danger of being eaten by a tiger or a lion. But generally speaking, we're pretty safe. We're probably at our desk or something like that. So actually getting away from the desk, doing a nice brisk 5-minute walk around the block, it will allow us to work some of that out, and just allow us to ground and anchor, whether it's in the breath, the body, what we can see around us, all very supportive to get that newer part of the brain, the neocortex, back online and let that little reptilian part of the brain know that we're safe in this moment.
Absolutely, thank you. And Cameron, on to you, in a similar vein, what are some small tips you would have that people can incorporate into their daily life to live a more healthy life?
Yeah, well, I'm actually just going to touch on what Fiona said to begin. So what I would deal with is a well-being triangle, and I want you to imagine that you've got your physical, like your activity, you've got your nutrition, and then you've got your recovery. And all 3 of those will make a good well-being triangle. That's something that's a balanced well-being program, to look at all 3 together. And if I touch on the recovery part with Fiona, it's something that I always see all the time with that 5-minute walk or even a little bit of fresh air, is think back 20, 30 years ago, where if you were to, or even now, if you were to nip out for a cigarette, nobody would bat an eyelid. You know what I mean? You'd nip out for a cigarette. And what is somebody doing there? Well, somebody is getting that little break. You always know that their heart rate is going to drop because they're breathing deeply. They're getting a little break away from the desk and away from the madness, even if it's only 2 or 3 minutes. If I'm sitting at my desk now or sitting in a meeting, and I say to somebody, you know what, actually, I just need a break. I'm just going to go missing for 3 minutes and I'll be back. You'll get the craziest looks ever, you know what I mean? So for recovery, for me, I would always recommend to clients is killing 2 birds with 1 stone effectively. 2 to 3 litres of water a day. You can ask yourself whether or not you get that, all right? And if you do, you're going to be cursing me, because every 40 minutes, every hour, you're in the toilet, all right? 2 to 3 litres of water will get you that break. You don't have to go smoking anymore. You don't have to even just try to go missing and not tell anybody. It's that little break. It's that little walk from the desk, because I know how easy it is to knock out 2.5 hours in front of a laptop. And you sort of just come back into the room and you're like, wow, it's 12 o'clock. Haven't eaten, haven't moved. Everybody has seen that before. Whereas if you're bursting to go to the toilet, there's only so long you're going to stay there. So for recovery, that's 1 tip for sure. 1 tip for physical activity, particularly because it's January, is do not underestimate 10,000 steps. That's not a fad, guys. Do not underestimate. And I'd love to give you a little story that a colleague gave his old Fitbit to his mum 2 weeks ago. This was 2 weeks ago. We only got the results back yesterday. Her resting heart rate was 98 beats per minute as she entered January, and she said her New Year's resolution is a little evening walk. It doesn't have to be a half an hour, it doesn't have to be an hour, it doesn't have to be brisk, it doesn't have to be relaxed. Just lace the boots up and get out the door. It's 2 weeks later and her resting heart rate is in the low 70s, guys. From 10,000 steps every day for 2 weeks. That's all it is. There was a study done in 2010, and I refer back to it in some of the seminars we do. And visceral fat, which is the toxic fat around your organs, the stuff that you don't want. After regular fit guys in a college, they were in their early to mid 20s, and they dropped from 10,000 steps to 1,300. And after 2 weeks, they had a 7% increase in visceral fat. That's the stuff you don't want. So after 2 weeks, guys, do not underestimate 10,000 steps for your recovery, your mental recovery, but also for your heart, your lung health. Get out there, get your 10,000 steps. There is no such thing as bad weather. There's only such thing as bad clothing. So get yourself wrapped up and get yourself out for sure. In terms of nutrition, a lovely little tip to take home is something that I do. I don't like spending my Sunday evening batch cooking for the whole week. I also don't have time to go cooking 3 times a day. So how are you going to match that? So something that works for me, hopefully it works for some of you, is to just make too much in the evenings. Make too much, bring it in for your lunchtime. By far, all the clients I deal with, most of them struggle with lunch. Their breakfast is fine because they've got up and they're ready to attack the day. The dinner is fine because it's probably planned because you got your groceries the weekend beforehand. The lunchtime is when you've had a stressful meeting, you've let yourself go hungry, you make some bad decisions. Prepping your lunch could be key to a well-being plan for yourselves. So that might work. Hopefully it does, just to make too much of whatever your good dinner is the evening before and bring it in the next day, something that's really handy, something that's really practical. And as much as it is something that's nutritious, think of the stuff that you're avoiding by doing that. Think of the stuff that you're avoiding by stress eating because you've already brought something in. So yeah, that would be the 3 tips for your well-being triangle.
Brilliant. And is this lady continuing with her steps? Is she
Absolutely.
pushing the limit now, yeah?
Absolutely. That's key as well, guys. For the whole 3 weeks that we talked about, the 21 days to start rewiring your brain and your body saying, okay, this is just the way things are now. If you don't have accountability, somebody dragging you out of bed or a diary or a coach, something like that, a nice little result like that will definitely propel you. So after 2 weeks, if she had negative results, what are the chances of her keeping it up? You know what I mean? Yeah. She got a positive result, the momentum builds, but you don't know where that'll lead in 6 months. You don't know where that could go, you know?
I might ask you to have a word with Betty Fitzgerald, my grandma, as well.
Yeah.
She could use a bit of that.
For sure.
Okay, so moving on to yourself, Fiona, and this is a big buzzword, multitasking. Whether it's at work or at home, what's your view on multitasking and using it to your advantage, or should it be used to your advantage? Should you single task and single focus on things, or is multitasking a good thing?
Yeah, actually, research now again is showing that multitasking really is a thing of the past. To be more productive, it's single tasking is more effective for our brains and for our productivity. We're less likely to make mistakes, and it's going to improve our memory. This kind of multitasking really affects our memory. So we are encouraging people in the B training to see how it is to single task going forward. I suppose just touching on something Cameron was talking about there, tips for the new year. I just wanted to come back to another area of, I suppose, brain training. I mentioned, the 10 minutes a day practice, and I have a 4-week program on a Lust for Life, if anybody did want to do that. But there's another lovely practice by Dr. Rick Hansen, and this one is called Taking in the Good. So it's really just 10 to 20 seconds practices during your day, because for some people they just have tried the 10 minutes, and unless you're in a kind of a group training program, it's very hard to keep up that momentum on your own. But this 10 to 20 seconds is just noticing something that's pleasant in this moment. And as we sit here with the people here in the audience, just noticing maybe the bodies are breathing, that we have these bodies that have allowed us to walk in here. Perhaps the body is digesting some nice food, or we can see all of these things that we take for granted. So I suppose we're seeing how it is to open up and become aware of, the good things that are present. It's not positive thinking, because that can just be more thinking. It's actually being aware of what we already have. And we have this built-in negativity bias, again, another survival mechanism to support that little reptile who is trying to survive. So, we do actually remember difficult experiences easier than pleasant ones, and in a sense, we needed to in order to survive. So we have to actively and intentionally notice some of the pleasant stuff that's happening. But it's not enough just to become aware. We have to actually savor it for 10 to 20 seconds. Maybe feel it in the body, whether it's a little lightness, you might notice it with the breath, or a sense of appreciation or gratitude. Staying with that feeling for 10 to 20 seconds allows those neural pathways in the brain to become more aware of that positive experience, and it balances out that negativity bias. So Another very simple way of, implementing this into our day by spending some time, noticing some of the good stuff. As well as one other thing to mention is a gratitude practice at night time. If we can spend a little bit of time at night time, I have a lovely 10-finger gratitude practice for anybody who wants to check it out on SoundCloud, or even just writing down 3 small things that we're grateful for in the day. Again, this is really going to support our feelings of well-being, and very, very supportive for our overall sense of well-being and happiness.
Brilliant. And you mentioned there Rick Hansen as being quite an influential writer for yourself.
Yeah, and I've trained with Dr. Rick Hansen, and he's just amazing. He's pioneering all this positive neuroplasticity, and he's got a great book called Rewiring the Brain. So, there's a lot of great work happening with even just taking small amounts of time each day to, notice some of what we have, because we take it for granted, don't we? We're on automatic pilot so much of the time, and it's a really key first step in any kind of mindfulness training, or maybe even a workplace well-being or brain training program, that how can we move out of automatic pilot a little bit each day? And we need it, for driving. I think it took me like 35 lessons to learn to drive, so it took me a while to get the hang of the clutch and that gear stick, but at the same time I can do it now. However, and it's really easy, but do I want to be living the whole of my life, the whole of this month, the whole of this year on automatic pilot? Yeah. And the answer is no. So I suppose, can we open up to some of the moments in our day? Maybe it's tasting that nice piece of fruit, or even just, trying a little chocolate meditation, maybe having a smell, tasting, savouring. And people always say to me, oh my gosh, the feeling or the experience of having that one piece of chocolate, I felt, much more satisfied than maybe eating the whole bar of chocolate mindlessly. So how can we move out of automatic pilot a little more in our day and be present? So I suppose there are a few more little ideas going forward for the year.
It's interesting as well, particularly in an environment like this, where a lot of people in similar roles to myself and throughout the organisation will be thinking 10 steps ahead of the current situation. You're thinking about a close date or an objective. So I suppose the feedback from a lot of your clients would be similar to that. It's thinking, 3 months, however far it is, in advance.
And, we do need planning, don't we? We need reflection, all of these things to get our work done, to meet our goals, deadlines, all of that. But I suppose I've heard a lot of feedback, actually, from people who've done the course, who were stuck in a kind of a problem-solving loop, trying to figure something out with regard to work. They came into the class, a couple of people have said this to me, and they did the practice, which was moving away from the thinking and coming to the breath or the body, okay? And actually, the answer came through doing that practice. So not being in that kind of spiral of problem-solving thinking, they actually came to the breath, the body. Because this body of ours holds a lot of information, but we often are going around like these levitating heads. All the activity is in the brain, but we've got this, emotional awareness, and we've got this physical body awareness too. So there's a lot of information here too. Okay, so I suppose taking some time off when we're very much living in the future, planning, but it can be really healthy. Daniel Goleman, who pioneers all this emotional intelligence stuff, he says if we can take some time, a couple of minutes each day to be present, it's really going to support us from moving into that de-stress. We need certain levels of stress, but if we're going at such a pace for so long without taking these moments, whether it's the couple of minutes walking around the block, coming to the body, whatever it is, eating with awareness, if we're not doing this a few times a day, it's going to affect our sleep. We're going to move into burnout quite easily. So kind of prevention rather than cure is the way I'd be inviting people to look at this, going forward with quite a young workforce here as well. So, keeping those brains and bodies and hearts, well for the future.
Yeah, being in the moment.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fiona. And before we hand it over to the audience for some questions as well, with yourself, Cameron, we just looking at some top 3 tips for kickstarting physical health in 2020. Now, you gave a fantastic one at the start with momentum coming into the year. Is there any others you would offer us as well as a kind of parting tips for us?
There is, of course. I would like to, firstly, call a spade a spade. Training regime is tough. Giving up all those gorgeous treats that you had the past couple of weeks is tough. We aren't robots. It takes time to change. And the number one that I would always do, whether it's work, whether it's anything, you got to ask yourself why. Because if your why doesn't match the amount of work this takes, then you won't uphold it at all. So I would take the time to ask yourself why. Why am I taking care of myself? Why am I going to the gym? Because a lot of people in January are going to the gym to punish themselves because of the amount of relaxing they did. That isn't self-care. That's not very well-being like to punish yourself, is it? You know what I mean? You're not a child. You can treat yourself with respect, and that's how you do it. You build that small bit of momentum that I previously spoke about. But if you don't ask yourself why, well then those dark mornings without accountability,
they get even darker.
They get very dark. It gets very easy not to get up when you don't have that why. So for sure, that would be the first one. The second one I would always say is to plan. So let's say you've got your why. My why for somebody that's in the industry is it would exercise and clean eating and plenty of sleep. What that would do for me is sharpen my focus. It increase my happiness levels. And mainly it keeps chronic illness at bay. I've seen what chronic illness does to families. I don't want that happen to mine. So that's why I train. And that's why I look after myself. So that would be my why. The second thing is to plan, because I do believe that an idiot with a plan could beat a genius that's not got one. You really got to plan. You really got to know what your food looks like. You really got to know what your exercise looks like for the week coming along. I think it's important to take the time on a Sunday to go through the week to plan that. And then the third one then is always accountability. Always. If it's a diary, if it's a parent, if it's a partner, a coach, it doesn't matter, because there will be times you won't do it. There will be times you won't do it. There will be times you'll be cursing yourself that you signed up for something like this. But accountability gets you through, because, mood follows action. You've got to act first, and then you start feeling the benefits and you start reminding yourself the reason why you started this, So a bit of accountability after that for sure.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cameron.
Cheers.
And Fiona, the same question to you. And we've got a lot of good advice already from both of you guys. But yeah, just your final 3 tips perhaps for the guys here.
Well, I suppose, starting with journaling, that can be, especially if we're feeling a little bit stressed, get a journal, just write. You don't even have to reread it, but just get into that habit of writing down what's going on in your brain, especially if you're feeling a little frazzled. So that can be a really good starting point. Get into the little gratitude practice at night time, starting to notice the little things that we're taking for granted in our day. And then, really trying with a friend, as I said, to maybe implement a 10-minute practice every day. Morning time is best, because at night time we can often just fall asleep, And the aim of the game here isn't really just falling asleep. It's actually opening up and being present to our experience from moment to moment. And like that, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who's kind of the man who pioneered all this kind of Western mindfulness and brain training stuff, he says you don't have to like it, you just have to do it.
Fiona, thank you very much. And thank you, Cameron. So I feel I've got the tools now, at least until Easter hits and I'm consuming all the Easter eggs, I'll be all right until then. So, guys, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Cheers,
you.
thanks.
And thank you, everyone. We would like to, there was a few almost claps there. We've still got some time for some questions, guys, if anyone would like to.
Once you get one, you get tons.
It's always the first one.
Yeah.
Thanks for a great talk. Very informative. Nice way to spend my afternoon. This one's more for Cameron. I've recently been reading a bit about fasting as an area of kind of, I suppose, cleansing the body and about a bit of health. But I'm not too sure on it, to be honest. And I was wondering what you've come across and what are your opinions on the whole area of not just intermittent fasting, but pure fasting, going a few days without food.
I've seen a lot of it, to be fair. What I would say first and foremost is the idea behind that is to give your digestive system a break. Just like any system, think of your car. If it's running all day, every day something's going to give. So the biggest thing that I would say to anybody around intermittent fasting or fasting in general is, if you are going to keep it up because it's tough, it's got to suit you. It's got to suit you. And this goes for your 3 big meals or 6 little meals as well. What I believe is, if you're getting the right nutrients in, it's the time that suits you. So what actually suits me is, I would intermittent fast. So I would only eat for 10 hours a day, and it would give you 14 hours of fasting. But that's because it suits me. I'm getting what I need from it. And a lot of people would say, okay, I'll get all of my calories in 8 hours. and I'll fast for 16. You are giving your system a break for 16 hours for sure. But then, look, it's still doing all of that work just condensed into 8 hours because you still got to eat the same amount. So all I would say is whatever suits you. The biggest thing when it comes to nutrition is to go back to basics, is to know what you're sure of and how that works for you. So if you go back to your basics and it's your 3 meals over whatever way you can do it because of your working day, you're getting in 3 good meals. If that works over 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours, 6 hours, absolutely no problem at all. Getting that in is avoiding all of the bad stuff. So a lot of people will have a pop at intermittent fasting, and let's say it comes to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. They're low on energy and they've come from a stressful meeting. It's very, very hard for them when they go to their next meal to make a good decision because it's the fight or flight response. They seek a bit of comfort. They're going to go and make a poor decision. Whatever keeps you on track in a healthy nutrition plan, that's what to go for. Because think of the stuff that you're not eating when you're doing something that works for you, for sure.
Okay, so it's kind of for around nutrition as well. What can you, is the food part, or okay, we can say they have equal importance, but is there one that you would get right first?
A lot of people will say because of our sedentary culture, we'll look after the exercise and it's probably 70-30 to nutrition. And to a certain extent, I would agree because there's so much bad stuff out there with so little education. But for me, no. When a client comes into me, it's 50-50. A lot of people say, you know what, I'll get my exercise right and then the food will come. Sure, the food will come. Or I'll get my nutrition right and then I'll start to exercise next week and the week after. And that for me, that rings a bell of analysis paralysis for me again. Everything needs to be right. Everything needs to be perfect in order for me to get going. There's no two ways about it. When you start, you're going to get stuff wrong. So start now. You might as well get it wrong. You might as well get some of the exercise wrong and some of the nutrition wrong. Get it wrong together. And then as you progress, you will get it better. It's going nowhere. You're going to be eating till the day you die. So get it right now or get it wrong now, but start. You know what I mean? It's definitely 50-50 for me.
Thank you. And then just one on the mindfulness and meditation. I find I've done meditation in the past and it was hugely beneficial when I was doing it, and I definitely saw the benefits. And then something big will happen in your life and it's probably the time you need it the most and you just can't do it and you can't find it. Any advice for that kind of situation where something happens and you go, I know the best thing for me now would be to breathe and take it, but it's impossible. Yeah. It feels impossible.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, if there's some very strong emotion happening in the body, it can be just so challenging, as you said, like to come to the breath or come to the body. So, a very famous mindfulness teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, he would say, go out and have a walk. Again, that engaging the body, but being present to it. And there is this idea that mindfulness is all about relaxation. And if I'm not feeling relaxed, I'm not doing it right. If my mind isn't quiet, I'm not doing it right. Okay, but that is not the case. We're just working with whatever is present. And yes, it's lovely to have a nice meditation practice where we can feel the breath, where we sense into the body, where we have some compassion towards ourselves. But equally, can we be present to those moments where we're feeling stressed, where the mind is racing, where we know we're gone down some kind of old rabbit hole of maybe trying to rewrite old histories? Can we bring a little bit of compassion that this is a moment of difficulty? Okay, so it's really about sensing in, if we can, how that feels in the body. We usually feel the emotions in the body, but again, it takes some training to start having awareness of sensation in the body. So there's a lovely little practice from the Mindful Self-Compassion program called the 3-step self-compassion break. And really, the 3 steps are noticing that this is a moment of difficulty. You know, this is hard. Step 2 is knowing that I'm not alone, the common humanity. We're all in this together. And then the third step at placing the hand over the heart, if that feels comfortable, this actually connects us in with our mammalian caregiving system. So it actually has a soothing effect on the body to put the hands on the body and connect with that. And then saying something nice to ourselves. That's the self-compassion. A little bit of kindness. I'm doing the best I can. It's okay. I'm a good person. So again, that's a really nice little practice to engage in if we are going through a difficult time, rather than just trying to bring our attention to the breath or the body when the mind is going to be getting so busy. Because often the mind tries to problem solve something it can't fix or figure out, and that's emotion. We need to move in and feel that emotion, you know. And we spend so much time avoiding that, don't we? Whether it's eating, drinking, smoking, or all the other things we engage in. Working too hard. So, you know, it's actually about maybe touching in and acknowledging that this is a moment of difficulty and bringing a little bit of kindness and compassion to ourselves. That's really going to support us in those moments.
I've got one for anybody really. If you guys have any recommendations on, I don't know, books or maybe podcasts other than Good Chats to listen to, that's good to get a kick started. I find myself, I follow a lot of influencers who are at step 10, they're all 2% body fat and eating only good food and all these stuff. Have you got any advice or anything to listen to kind of get that ball rolling and get the momentum going?
For sure, yeah. The number one most important book ever for me that I'd recommend to anyone is by a psychologist called Carol Dweck. It's called Mindset. And it just differentiates, you know, this term that everybody knows now, it's growth and fixed mindset. And she sort of coined it. She delves into it and she gives you an idea of what it is, what that is when you're looking at somebody on Instagram like that with crazy filters and whatever it looks like to you, and it looks really unattainable. It gives you the idea that, you know, we're actually not just born either able to do this or not able to do this. And if we keep probing this and we care about it enough, it will give. Wherever that looks like for you, whatever these goals that you've got, or that's the number one for me. I speak a lot in schools and I just hand that out to teenagers all the time. That one really changed the game for me in terms of podcasts. I would be real into alternative or Eastern health as opposed to endurance athletics. So having a look at both of those and all under the umbrella of just unwavering self-respect, I would go for the Rich Roll podcast. He's brilliant. He's got some great guests on that as well.
Thanks for that. And I'd recommend, you know, Dr. Rick Hansen, he has a blog, it's just 1 minute. And, you know, he sends out information every week. And again, little short practices, very much based on science. And he's just a really interesting guy. He's got a great TED Talk as well. Mark Williams, who's one of the pioneers of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, he's a very nice, user-friendly book called Living in a Frantic World. So they'd be a few good places. As well as that, then I mentioned I have a 4-week free program on a lust for life. It'd be very much based on the evidence-based MBS or 8-week program. So, you know, you could give that a go each week, just read the notes, maybe engage in some of the practices that are there on the links, and that'd give you a really good starting place as well.
A quick question for you, Fiona. So this probably goes against everything you were saying about getting away from your phone and being present, but is there any apps or things like that you would recommend? I know Headspace is one that I hear thrown around a lot.
Yeah, Headspace seems to be, a very popular one. And, you know, I suppose it's not that the phones are a problem. It's just that if we are connected in with them all the time, that's the problem. Even with our emails and work, I recommend that people maybe take the notifications off, even the computer, and maybe, you know, coming back to that, you know, single tasking, maybe check the emails at the end of the hour or the end of an hour and a half, rather than just having that ping coming in all the time, because our little Stone Age brains aren't able for all of that information. So there's a nice little app that I use a lot. It's called Insight Timer. It's free, and you can just even set like 10 minutes with a bell every minute, or you can get some guided meditations there. So that'd be another good one. There's also Stop, Breathe, Think, another free app. So there's a couple of them there. And just to say with the phones, really encouraging people to maybe put the phones aside in the evening time, getting ready for bed, turning off the screens as best you can. We know this stuff, but it really does support our sleep, and that is so important. If we're not getting sleep, if we're not maybe keeping our alcohol, on the low side for January, we're not able to bring awareness to whether it's concentration, our good intentions, the body, all of these things.
So to all of our studio audience, thank you very much for participating, for your questions. And most of all, thank you very much to Fiona and Cameron for a very insightful session. Thank you, guys.
Pleasure. Thanks, James.
Thanks very much.